Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. All right, so we're recording. Hey, everybody. I want to welcome you. Thanks for showing up tonight. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. Her name is Becky Austill-Clausen. And what I want to do is I'm going to just kind of talk to Becky, let her tell you about who she is, what her experience has been that led her to where she is now. And we're going to ultimately talk about a free webinar that she's got coming up on October the 7th called 3 Ways to Connect with your Deceased Loved One, or something to that effect. I'll let Becky give you the official name. So with that, I just want to say hi and welcome to Becky.
Hi, Brian. It is truly a pleasure being here. Thank you so very much. I am totally honored, and I am thrilled to be able to share my story about what happened with me. Actually, 25 years ago today, my 37-year-old brother passed. And would you like me to just keep rolling, or?
Yeah, but first I want to tell you that I'm honored to have you here on the anniversary of your brother's passing. I know it's a special day for you, and I know, for some people it's a sad day, but for you, I know it's a day of celebration. So
Yes.
I want to say I'm honored to have you here today.
Well, I am honored to be here. It's the perfect venue to talk about my brother. I couldn't believe my brother died. It made absolutely no sense. He had come out that he was gay when he was in his early 20s, and it was, this was in the early 1990s, and we were walking on the beach at Cape Cod, and we always go for a family vacation, and it was in the 1990s. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of people dying of AIDS all the time. It was similar to the pandemic we're having right now, only we didn't really know. Well, we don't know what's happening right now either, but
Right.
It was very confined to to a certain population, and gosh, it was tricky. And so I was walking on the beach with my brother, and he was in his, he must have been about 34 at the time. And his name's David, and he's 4 years younger than I am. And so I just casually said to him, David, have you been tested for AIDS? And he turned away. And Brian, it was so horrendous. I did not expect that at all. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life, and my heart started to beat faster. And you're going to hear a Boston accent. I am from the right outside of Philadelphia, but I grew up around Boston. The accent's still there. So my heart's beating faster. And oh my gosh, I thought, what is he going to say? And he turned back and he said, I'm HIV positive, which I didn't know what that was. I'm a science-based occupational therapist. I didn't know. I didn't know what HIV was. And I said, well, David, what's that? And he said, it goes into AIDS. And he also said that he was getting excellent care, because at first I said, well, what can I do to help? What can I do? Are you getting good medical care? And he said, yes, I'm right outside of Boston. I'm getting the best care I can. I'm going into Boston for that. And please don't tell anybody. And I always like to say that part, because I had no support system. And somehow I was led to go to the bookstore. Now I read all the time, and I had no idea there was a section in the Barnes & Noble local Exton, Pennsylvania bookstore called New Age. I didn't even know what New Age was, quite frankly. And so I was at the New Age section, and I realized that it was filled with books about the afterlife. And I had no idea there was a chance that there was a life after this. I just didn't. But somehow I started to read a lot of books, and it was very important to me that the author sounded normal. And I would read about the author, and I would go back, and if I liked them, if they sounded fine, I would go back to their very first book and read everything they wrote, because I wanted to hear their journey. So David passed, and it was horrendous. I just couldn't understand it. And there were some interesting things that happened when he was in the hospital. But the scene I like to tell the best is that 6 weeks after he passed, I was riding my horse through a Christmas tree farm. And that day I got the best present of my life. And my heart had been closed. You know, when we're so filled with grief, we can't feel anything except for the grief. And we need to release some of that grief in order for us to feel. And I couldn't find anything positive about the fact my brother died, so my heart's closed. But that day, it was middle of November, and we had our first frost, and icicles were sparkling and rainbows were around. And I opened up my heart just a little bit and said, "Thank you, universe, for a beautiful day." I closed my eyes, and there was my brother. And he was wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. And I had never, ever, ever done anything like this, experienced anything like this, read about anything like this. And I started to talk with him. And seriously, after about maybe a second, I realized I didn't have to talk. I could just send thought. And he was great, and I was spectacular. And I looked to his right, and there were my grandparents. And they had passed about 10 years ago, holding hands like they always did. Oh, wow. Beside them was David's best friend, Edward, who had passed about 6 months ago. A friend of mine, Holly, who had passed when I was in college. So that was about 20 years ago, and about 24 other people. Brian, it was incredible. The scene was luminescent. People were filled with joy, and they were all in human form, all there, all alive. And I looked behind David with a huge grin on my face, and I saw there was a golden arch. And I always like to say it's not McDonald's. Yeah. It was, but it was a beautiful golden arch. And by that point, I had read hundreds of books. And so I was aware that there might be some type of afterlife, but I had no idea whether it was right or not. But I had read that if you see a doorway, it could be a entrance to another realm. And so I looked to David to see if he was going to take me through. And instead of my 4'10" grandma, Bessie Dole, she takes me by the hand, and we actually skip through this doorway. And on the other side of the door is a fuchsia-colored land. You know, I have two boys. My husband and I, Jeff and I, have two boys now. One's 31 and one's 33. And at this point, they say, "Mom, do not say fuchsia." And I'm like, "Why not?" And they say, "It sounds like you're high, sounds like you're tripping, sounds like you're loaded." And I wasn't any of those. Yeah. And it was fuchsia, like it was. Wow. And at that point, I hear my other grandfather, my dad's dad, and he had passed about 15 years ago. I didn't see him, I heard him. And he said, "Get over here," with a beautiful voice. And he took me by the hand, and we fly through this fuchsia-colored land for what seemed like hours, reminiscing, experiencing love, feeling how pleasant it is to be with each other. And all of a sudden, after a while, my horse starts to move, because I was on my horse with my eyes closed. And so the horse is moving. And I said to Gramps, I need to go back. And so we did this U-turn in this fuchsia-colored land. And he brings me right back. It was like immediate, right back to the arch. I fly through the arch. The horse is moving. My brother's there, my grandparents, Edward, Holly, 24 other people. The horse is moving. And I say to everybody, I need to go back. And you know, Brian, the answer consistently, all at the same time, was, "We will always be here. We will always be here." And I pulled up the reins, and I thought, my gosh, what just happened to me? Yeah. It was absolutely incredible. And I thought, you know, I want to learn how to do this again. And I looked for a teacher, and there's a whole story about how I found a shaman. I found a shaman 40 minutes away and apprenticed with her for 3 to 6 hours a week, and learned how to talk to my brother, learned how to talk to other people that had passed, met all sorts of spiritual entities. And I thought I was nuts. I thought I was schizophrenic. I thought I was losing my mind, except that it felt right. Yeah. Like it felt real. It was a knowing. And even though I questioned my brain, I continued to pursue all sorts of energy training. I went to workshops all the time. And after about 20 years, it was only about 5 years ago, I said to my chief financial officer, Bob, and we'd been working together for gosh, over 20 years. And I said, Bob, my soul is crying out for me to publish what happened to me. And he said, Becky, I'd be very glad to stay here if you think I can do the job. And I looked at him, and we'd been together for 20 years. And I said, you mean you'd like to buy the business? And he said, only if you think I can do it. And by that point, I had this business for 32 years, and I'd started it myself and ended up with hundreds of therapists and thousands of clients and excellent retention of the staff. And I love this business. And for him to say, yes, I would be glad to stay here, it was absolutely such a gift. And it's been a wonderful ride. I published a book, and I thought people might think that I thought I might be ostracized. I thought people would think I had lost my mind. I made sure at the end of the book there were close to 300 references, so people think, okay, if she's a little far out, at least we know that she's a reader, and she has read a lot of these studies, and it's been wonderful. I wrote this book. It's called Change Maker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life, and it ended up winning 5 National Book Awards, much to my amazement. And there's every chapter is a month. It starts when my brother passed in October. Every chapter has what's called an illumination. And that's where I talk directly to the reader. I share what happened during the month of October, and then each illumination for that chapter relates to what happens. And I give some suggested activities and recommendations. It's classic occupational therapy. How can someone else help themselves to have a similar experience if they want? And it's been a marvelous ride. It's been really, really fun.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I hear you say that, and you go through kind of the classic things that we go through in grief, right? So the first thing you said, you're feeling this almost shock, I guess, and numbness. But when you are able to open up and start to feel the gratitude, that's when this stuff starts to open up to you. And you have this, what we now call a spiritually transformative experience, which I'm guessing you probably didn't have that language then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you think, and you're a business owner, right? So you're a solid citizen of the community.
I had 2 parts of my brain. It was the most curious thing. I had my business brain, and then I had the spiritual brain. And I did not know the term spiritual transformative experience until, gosh, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And to find out that other people have had similar experiences was fantastic. Because I thought I was sort of alone in this. And not only are there millions of people that have had spiritual transformative experiences, it's very similar to a near-death experience in that the after effects are very, very similar. And that's according to a fellow by the name of Bruce Grayson. And he has Grayson's scale of, gosh, I forget the exact name, but it's something like Grayson's scale of the afterlife or near-death experiences or something like that. And he has essentially 25 different points that he says, well, how do you feel now? And the experiences between spiritual transformative experiences and a near-death experience are very similar. Yeah. So all of a sudden there's a community.
Yeah, I think that the only real difference, as from what I've seen, is the physical trauma that goes along with the near-death experience. But there can also be this, you become back, you're a different person. People a lot of times have heightened abilities. And there's a process of integration. There's a thinking you're going crazy, and you become a different person. I mean, did you experience that you came back as like not the person you were before this happened?
Absolutely. Oh, Brian, you articulated that so well. I've always been a workaholic, and I still am, actually. Only what I'm doing now, I absolutely love. But my whole life, I was searching for the meaning of life. Like, I thought this life was interesting, but it didn't seem to be enough. And a friend of mine who's a Reiki master, and I learned Reiki and became a Reiki master after about 10 years of practicing Reiki. She said to me recently, she said, Becky, it seems like your whole life you've been preparing for this time.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like. You know, it
Yeah.
feels like my whole life was getting ready for right now.
You know, that's wild, because I feel the same way about what I'm doing now, and I'm like 59. It's like, why did it take me this long to get here? But I think we get here at the time we're supposed to, and a lot of times it unfortunately is this trauma that actually kicks us into it. And so a lot, people will say, well, why did this happen to me? Why did my son pass away, or why did my spouse pass away, or why did this bad thing happen to me? But it's good when you look at somebody that's lived the path as you have, to say, hey, there's meaning in this, there's purpose in this. And you and I were talking before we got on, and I was saying, I was talking to a client earlier, and I said, you'll see your son, or you'll see your son again, when you cross over. And you said, but maybe sooner. And
Yes.
that's the part that I think we forget about. We can still continue that relationship even now.
It's been so healing, Brian. It's absolutely wonderful to be able to acknowledge signs and symbols and communication that I have, not only with my brother David, but with my parents when they passed, when my uncle passed, when my brother-in-law passed. Like, it's really quite astounding to be
Mm-hmm.
able to communicate with them. And I always say, how is it? How is it? And the love and the freedom that people have is so pronounced. But to have that relationship continue
Mm-hmm.
has been spectacular, absolutely spectacular. So my grief has changed into a everlasting love and a
Mm-hmm.
joy, and it's so fun to get a sign. And I get these signs, and I think everybody can learn how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get these signs, we think, now really, is that really my brother or my mother or my sister or my spouse or, my daughter, or who, you think, gosh, is that really a sign? But honest to Pete, it is. And
Yeah.
I have so many people call me up or email me, I had this happen to me and I think it might be a sign. And rarely, if ever, do I say, I listen very carefully, but rarely do I say, no. I say, yes, it's a sign, and way to go. And
Yeah,
how do
I,
you
I always tell
feel?
people, don't question the sign. If you think it's a sign, it's a sign. Don't go to someone else to validate it for you. If it
Yep.
made you think of your loved one, then take it as a sign. And yeah, I think it's kind of like, sometimes we think, well, this is too good to be true. Or I'm an engineer, so I'm an analytical person. So I'm like, well, how did they do it? How do they get the song to come on the radio at the right time? Or do they get me in the car at the right time? Or do they tell me to turn the radio on? Or so I want to know how the gears work behind it. But what I've seen as I've become more open, it is. And the universe that we live in is really a magical place. There's all kinds of magic going on around us all the time, if we just keep our eyes open to it.
Agreed. And it is magical. Oh my gosh. And even, I've been getting these signs and symbols and such for 25 years, and I still get so excited. I think it was 2 years ago, and I do a fair amount of presentations, particularly in the fall. And I was going to the first one in October that I had on October 1st. So it was
Mm-hmm.
2 years from this day. And my brother, of course, passed 10-1. So I get in my car and I was driving over to New Jersey. But before I drove, I looked at the odometer. Every single number on the odometer was either a 1 or a 0. And I'm talking even like the tenths were either a 0 or a 1. And it was such a wonderful sign from my brother, because he passed on 10-1. I see ones and zeros all the time. This was today's 10-1. And I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you, David. Thank you. And it's extraordinary.
Yeah, and that's cool that you still get excited about receiving those signs. And some people say, well, am I going to get signs in 25 years? Are they going to forget about me, and will they move on? And we hear about when people cross over, they just become balls of light, and they don't have their personality anymore. They're not the same one that we knew. So what's your experience been as you've communicated with people on the other side? Are they still the same?
Yes, I feel that this is what I feel. And I always say, if I feel something that doesn't resonate, believe what you want to resonate, because we're each here to have our own journey.
Hmm.
With that being said, I have spent, oh my gosh, thousands, probably thousands of hours studying and living in the afterlife when I communicate with loved ones. And what I feel is that the essence of us still remains. So like if we can be compacted into a tiny, tiny, tiny little pinprick that holds the essence of us, we still retain it. The woman that taught me, her name's Nancy Ariel, and she has passed, but she used to say, Uncle Charlie remains Uncle Charlie, whether he's on this earth or whether he's in the afterlife, he's still Uncle Charlie. And so I do believe people retain that essence of themselves. And if they're funny, they're going to remain funny. And my brother has been a jokester, and so there's just some funny things that he does that I'm like, oh my gosh, that is amazing. That couldn't have been done any other way except from David, from the afterlife. But he's absolutely been around. And so I mean, you're an engineer and I'm a science-based occupational therapist, and I'm like, well, now how does he do that? Like, how does that happen? And what I believe is that there are all these different realms, and people, when they pass, they can keep going through the different realms, but they can also translocate, meaning they can be in multiple places at the same time. And for us on Earth, you know, that's so like foreign a concept. We're here, you know, we're in this place, and during meditation, we can relax and such, but pretty much our physical body is here. But when we pass, at least what I think and have heard and believe and all of that, is that we can be in multiple places at the same time, because we're all energy. And so our energy is connected to everything. So we don't have to be in one place, which is really quite, to me, it's quite profound and magical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that explains a lot of what we experience, that, you know, people can seem to be, you know, different places at the same time where when they're in the spirit world. But if we think about it, I mean, like in our minds, I can think of a place I've been before right now, and I can go there in my mind. Now, my body is not physically there, but that's because I'm tied to this body right now. So once I'm free of this body, then maybe I'm able to do that translocation. And
I
like
love that.
Swedenborg talks about in the afterlife that thought brings proximity. So literally, the more you're thinking about somebody, the closer they are, and vice versa. If you don't want to think about somebody, they're literally farther away from you.
I love that. Thought brings proximity. That's great.
Yeah.
I also feel that thought has energy. So it brings proximity. And if we are thinking positive, it facilitates positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more positive we think with intention, if we want to really communicate with our loved ones that have passed on, which I fully believe we can all do. And I've been teaching this for 5 years full time.
Mm-hmm.
Plus I've been doing it, you know, before then a little bit quietly.
Yeah.
But people have learned, and a lot of it's trust, you know, to trust that the afterlife is real and that I am experiencing things that are from my deceased loved one. It's really quite something.
Yeah, that's one of the, I think the big things about it is just believing what we're experiencing, because we've all become, not all, but a lot of us have become so jaded by this materialistic view that people tell us that if you've experienced this, you're going crazy, you know. But, you know, you talked about the studies that you've done, and I've done studies also, and I've seen people, you know, Gary Schwartz, who studied mediums, and Julie Beischel, who studied mediums. And like the psi phenomenon has been studied more than like anything there is out there. The government knows it works. They've actually, you know, the government's done studies on it. So it's interesting how we have a hard time, you know, believing that. And that's, I think that's what blocks that communication. The first barrier is overcoming our own mind.
Agreed. I've traveled to a variety of different cultures that believe in the afterlife, and it's so different from what we experience here in the United States. It's really been quite astounding. I was in Ireland last spring, and it was on an invitation from a wonderful author who's also a chiropractor, Mary Helen Hensley. And she said, why don't you come on over? And within 4 hours, we were at a tomb, a 4,000-year-old tomb, that I went into the center of this tomb. And on the ceiling was the spiral of life, the eternal sign of everlasting life. And there happened to be a tour guide at the tomb. And I said, do you believe in the afterlife? And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he said, yes, of course we believe in the afterlife. Now, for me to ask that to somebody here in the United States, most likely I wouldn't have got that same reaction. But he's like, yes, the person that built this tomb, and I keep going like this because it was a round tomb. Mm-hmm. The person that built this tomb wanted to have very comfortable surroundings. And so that's why he built this lovely tomb. And there was a symbol of the afterlife, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it's interesting also that, a lot of us in this country are Christians, right? A lot of us were raised with church and the Bible and everything, but we don't really we kind of believe in the afterlife, but we really kind of don't. And when we hear someone say that I had a spiritual experience like you did, or I had a near-death experience, I've had experience with people saying, I've been told this was of the devil. I've been told it's this hallucination. I've been told this, I've been told that. And I'm like, well, I've read the Bible quite a bit, and I see a lot of, Paul talks about being, in the seventh or third heaven or whatever it was. And he talks about having this experience on the road to Damascus. And, there's a lot of evidence in the Bible, even that people do have these experiences, people seeing angels, all over the place. And I interviewed, people that have seen angels. They're like, and so we believe it when it's in the Bible, but we don't believe it when it's the person we're sitting in front of.
Isn't it interesting? I find that whole concept interesting. And I think we've become such a biomechanical society that we must see the physical proof in order to believe it. I wanted to share a story of a friend of mine, and he passed, I think he was young. I think he passed like maybe 58, 59. And I got word that he passed when I was riding in a car. My husband and I actually were going to Cape Cod for our summer vacation. I think it was 3 years ago. And this fellow died immediately, absolutely died immediately. He didn't know that he was going to pass. He had been working in New York City, and he was waiting at the bus stop, sitting on a park bench. And he was sort of slumped down, and his buddies got on the bus. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. He had finished his shift, and they said, "Hey, come on. And he had passed. And I received a call from some friends, and they said, "Becky, can you please get in touch with him?" And so I said, we're in the car and we're pulling our RV. And I said to my husband, "Hey, Jeff, I need to get in touch with this fellow." Mm-hmm. And it was so interesting because he said, "Becky, what happened?" And it happened so fast to him, he wasn't aware. But the reason I wanted to mention that is that he wasn't really sure where he was. Mm-hmm. He knew that something had happened. But after a little bit, and he started to realize what had happened and that he was going to miss his loved ones. And he went through them name by name. It was quite amazing. And I said to him, you have two angels beside you. And he looked to the left, and then he looked to the right, and he got a beautiful smile on his face. And he said, I'm going to explore here. I'll be back, but I'm going to explore. And it was such a wonderful way for him to receive love from of course me, and be receiving all the love from all the people that he had left behind. But he now has a whole new area to explore, and the angels were on each side of him, and they gently he linked his arms in theirs, and he gently rose, and it was absolutely a beautiful scene. It was really quite stunning. And he's been around quite a lot. He was around quite a lot for at least like 3 to 4, maybe 6 months. Very, very, very constant presence. Mm-hmm. And it was lovely when he was able to see the angels raising him up.
Wow, that's amazing. So you study with the shaman, and you learn from her, and then you've developed your own techniques, I take it. And so tell me about the workshop you're going to be teaching on October the 7th.
Sure. I'm very glad to. I'm so excited to be presenting. It's called The 3 Secrets to Communicating with Your Deceased Loved Ones. And it's going to be on October 7th. It's from 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. And it's going to be recorded. So if people can't can't make that, it's good to register anyway, because you'll get the recording and such. But it goes through 3 basic principles in order for us to communicate with our loved ones that have passed. And we've talked about one. The first one is to believe that the afterlife is real. You need to believe that it's real. And we can doubt and we can have questions, but if your heart and your mind can actually allow yourself to believe that it's real, it does help tremendously. That's step number 1. Yeah. I call it the secret. That's the secret number 1. The second one is to trust. Trust your own inner self. And I keep putting my hand up to my heart, because so much of what this is heartfelt belief in ourself, to trust what we believe is right. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right for you.
Yeah.
But if you can allow yourself to trust your inner guidance, it'll help. And I talk about all sorts of ways that we can do this and provide all sorts of validations about how the afterlife, we can think and believe that the afterlife is real. And then the third secret, Brian, is that love surpasses all boundaries. And it's been such a wonderful gift to be able to share love with my brother, to share love with my parents, with people that have passed, to receive their love. Love is the strongest emotion there is. And so for us to be able to share love across all boundaries is the third secret. And so during this, it's a 90-minute webinar. During this webinar, and it's free. It's free again on October 7th, 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. To be able to share these principles and to provide people with the belief that, yes, if I can do this, so can you. And it really is exciting. And there are just lots of additional courses and classes and sessions that are going to happen. And I'm really, really, really excited to be able to share this, hopefully to a worldwide audience.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being there myself. I know you and I've talked before, and your communication, across the veil is amazing. And what's interesting, I hear a lot of people say, well, we can all learn to do this, at least to some extent, but it's not natural for everybody. We don't all have that spiritually, transformative experience like you did, but we can all learn to improve on what we have. And I think, like you said, trusting, because people ask me about my communication with my daughter, and I think it's different for everybody. I don't see her and I don't hear her, stuff like that, but I always just feel like she's here. I feel like she's with me, and I hear her thoughts in my head, but they're in my own voice, but we communicate back and forth all the time. And then I see the signs. And, it was interesting because her 5th year anniversary of her passing was this June.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And that day, my friends were like, I'm praying for signs and stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be disappointed. So I'm really not going to look for much of anything. So I'm driving my wife to therapy because she just had knee replacement surgery. And I look up in front of me, and there's this truck sitting there. And on the back of the truck, not a bumper sticker, it was like stenciled on the back of the truck. It said, "I'm right here!" ! Point. And I was so zoned out, I didn't even see it. My wife goes, "That's a sign from Shana. It says I'm right here." And then I looked in the back window of the truck, and there's this meme, or the sticker now people have. It's home, and it's H, and then the letter of your state is the O. And so Shana was born in Ohio, and we live in Ohio, and there was a home sticker on the back window of the truck. So I'm like, I'm right here, home. And I'm like, wow, that was impressive, And then that day, like, Shana turns the lights on in our bedroom. They go on and off, the ceiling fan in our bedroom. And it doesn't happen very often anymore. But that day I went upstairs and the light was on in the bedroom.
Oh, so my gosh.
I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. So we just have to, and when that happens, you have to trust it, But again, I'm the engineer. Okay, what are the odds? What are the odds that the light would come on that day? What are the odds I'd be behind the truck on that day? Because I've never seen the sticker before. I've never seen that truck before. Haven't seen it since. And my conclusion is the odds are, infinitesimal that would actually happen.
Agreed. And so then when you think about the odds, and you think about how wonderful it makes us feel, it's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift from our loved ones in the afterlife, and allowing ourselves to believe and to feel the love and to feel the connection is so special. Our lives become so magical once we open up our hearts and our brains to the afterlife. It's absolutely phenomenal. You know, I don't always see people. I was lucky that first time, but I also most of the time feel the energy, see the signs. 85% of after-death communication occurs in dreams.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times in dreams, you know, it's a very special dream that has our loved one that's already passed in it. And it's a dream that we remember. You know, most of our dreams we don't remember. But these ones that have our loved ones, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful. And people wake up and they think, oh my gosh, I just had a dream of my, you know, whoever it is that is passed. And that's them communicating with us.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful.
Yeah, it is. I've had this dream, and it's interesting because Shayna, you know, she's my baby. She was my younger daughter, and she was only 15 when she passed. And I noticed in my dreams, she's always younger, because that's the age I longed to have her, when I could hold her and stuff. So in my dream, she's younger, and it was interesting because a lot of times I have these dreams, and I would realize, oh, she's not supposed to be here, and I get excited, and I would wake myself up. So I'm like, I gotta learn to stay calm, you know, when I see her. But yeah, you're right. They're very special when you have them. You kind of know. I want to let people know how to sign up for the webinar.
Great.
Go to pages.grieftogrowth.com. So it's pages, grief, 2, growth.com, and then /Becky. I've got a sign up page there. You can sign up for the free webinar, and go ahead and sign up for it, whether you can attend live or not, because you will get a recording of it. And I'll put that in the notes when I put this on YouTube, and when I post it to Facebook. So you don't have to remember that. If you want to, you can go there. But yeah, I think it's going to be great, because I think, you know, a lot of the people that I talk to are parents whose children have crossed, and we're not done, you know, communicating with them. You know, it's when a grandparent goes, we can say, well, you know, I'll see them, you know, eventually. But when it's a kid, we're like, we want to have that connection. And it's really encouraging to know that we can have that connection, and we can learn how to do it.
People can learn how to do this. And a lot of it is really a belief, a trust, and an experience. And you will have all of those.
Yeah.
So many times people have said to me, because I travel all over the world, actually, talking about this and sharing it and explaining the process and such. And people say, I've never had a sign. And I'll look at them and say, with a great deal of love and sympathy and support, you've never had a sign. And they're like, well, I had a couple of dreams. And I'm like, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it was a while ago. I'm like, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because there's no time. And that for me was such a huge concept, because as a business owner, which I've been multiple times, I'm very aware of time. Like I measure time in minutes and sometimes seconds and half an hours and all of that. And to have a existence where there's no time, because if we live forever, there is no time except here on earth.
Right.
And so what seems like a long period of time for us, well, I haven't heard from my loved one in a long time, really could just be like a mini second from someone when they look at eternity. So it is really quite astounding and very healing to be able to communicate with our loved ones that have passed. Yeah,
that reminds me, Kelvin Chen, who I've done work with, he tells a story about someone who had passed, and he said, when I pass, I'm going to get back to you a sign as soon as possible. It was 16 years before he got the sign back to his sister who he had left behind. And the thing is, you know, on the other side, time is different. So we might think, I haven't heard from them in a long time. And when we communicate that to them, they say, it was just a second ago. You know, what are you talking about? It hasn't been that long. But the comforting thing is, a lot of times we think, are they missing us? And I don't think they miss us in the same way that we miss them, because they experience time differently.
You know, that's an excellent point, Brian. I really, really like that point a lot. I wouldn't say they don't miss us at all. And that's not what you
Right.
said.
No. Yeah.
You said they don't miss us in the same way, which I absolutely agree. And that's what happened when this fellow was rising and there were the two angels on each side. It was a whole nother dimension, and it was something for him to explore. And that's what he said. I'm going to explore. I'm going to explore where I am. And it's a wonderful feeling to know that even though we're quite grief-stricken, our loved ones, they will also feel the grief, but actually they're feeling joy and then turning it around and sharing their love with us.
Yeah. Well, I try to think of it like, it's like if our kids on vacation or they've gone away to college, we miss them, but we know we're going to see them soon. My daughter lives 25 minutes away now. I only see her every few weeks now, but I know I'm going to see her. So I don't miss her, in the way I do I might miss Shayna if I hadn't shifted this perspective. And I just think of Shayna as having gone home.
Well said.
That Shayna's gone home and I'm still here working. So, when I get done working, I'll go home and I'll see her when I go home.
Well said. If not before.
Yeah, if not before. We do have a live audience, which is unusual. I've never done this before. What I want to say is I'm recording this, of course. So anybody that does participate, know that your face will be on the recording. So that's your disclaimer. That's my disclaimer to you. But if anybody would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute your microphone and ask a question. Or if you'd like to type a question into the chat, if you don't want to, be exposed or be on the video, you can type it into the chat. But I want to open that up to people if you have any questions for myself or for Becky, or any comments you'd like to make. I see Teresa typed in. I see a lot of signs now that I'm looking for them. I have a hard time figuring out who has contacted me because I have lost so many in the last few years. So what would you say to her, Becky?
Sure. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's an interesting question. I'm going to answer it in two different ways. Mm-hmm. The first way is that we're all connected. So we're all connected. So you might not necessarily know exactly who you're receiving the information from. But I think that's sort of a general answer. The more specific answer is trust your heart. Who do you think it's from? And then ask questions. Mm-hmm. Like all sorts of mediums will say, ask for the evidence. Ask for the evidence. How can I know? Ask them. Who is this? And then whatever pops in your head immediately, like whatever is the first thing that pops in your head, that most likely is who it is. And that's how you can define who it is and such. Share your love, express gratitude. Definitely express gratitude. Thank you so much for being here. And send your love and ask for the evidence. Please, who is this? Just ask.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea you said, just who do you feel that it is? Who did you think of first? And that's probably, who it is. And learn, we have to learn to trust ourselves. But that also reminds me of a story. My wife, she was in meditation. She kept seeing like this little purple light. And she was wondering, if it was our daughter, if it was Shayna, but she hadn't told me, she hadn't told anybody. And one day Suzanne Wilson calls up, or Suzanne Giesman, I should say, because Shayna drops in on her. So Suzanne Giesman calls up and she asked Ty, first of all, she always offers evidence. So she said, have you been using mandala beads, these beads? And Ty says, well, yeah, my friend gave them to me. I just kind of got them out. I was looking at this book. And so I've been using the beads. And she said, well, okay, that's the evidence that Shayna has dropped in on me. She says, Shayna says you have a question. And Ty goes, I don't think I have a question. She goes, yeah, Shayna's insisting you have a question for her. And she said, well, the question is, when I see this light, is that Shayna? And she says, yes, Shayna's saying that's absolutely her. So that she wasn't able to really trust herself. She felt it was Shayna, but she was able to get that validation when she actually asked the question.
It's great. Suzanne Giesman is such a good medium, and her books are fantastic. And it's really a very high quality evidential medium that we all have access to. And she's like, ask for the evidence, ask for it, and you'll get it.
Yeah. And I think we can all, like I said, for myself, I have to learn to trust myself, learn to not expect to have someone else's experience. I get to interview people that have had amazing experiences. And sometimes I can get jealous and say, man, I wish I had the experience that Becky had, or, I wish I experienced that Nancy had, or whatever. And what I tell people is, I think you get what you need. And I think for me, for my journey, if I got that type of experience, it might throw me off my track. I think I have to trust that I'm getting what I need, and trust when you do get those signs, to that it is really a sign. Because I've had so many people say to me, same thing as you, I haven't had any signs except for that dream that I had, and except for the fact that, like, my TV keeps turning itself off and on by itself, and my lights in the bedroom flicker, and they never did before. But besides that, I haven't gotten any signs at all.
Right. Besides that.
Yeah.
I agree.
I'm looking forward to the webinar. So remind us of the name again.
Sure. It's called The 3 Secrets to Communicating with Your Deceased Loved Ones. And it's on October 7th, 2 to 3:30 Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah.
It's a 60-minute talk that we're giving, a lot more extensive than what we're doing now, because I'm really delving into each of the 3 different components. And then there's going to be 30 minutes of questions and answers. And it is recorded. So if you are unable to make it on October 7th, it's a Wednesday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. We set it, one of the reasons why we set it for 2 is so that the Greenwich Mean Time, which is like the United Kingdom, etc., it'll be, I think it's 6 o'clock that time. And so I wanted to hit the Pacific Coast time, which is 11 o'clock, and 2 o'clock Eastern, and Greenwich Mean Time and such. I'm really trying to get a worldwide.
I think Shannon will appreciate it, because Shannon always has to stay up till the middle of the night to do these things. So. She says, "Thank you very much for doing it." Poor Shannon. She's in France, so I see her all the time. It's great that we can do it. You can do it in the afternoon. And the great thing about technology is it'll be recorded, and people can get the recording, and that's wonderful. And I saw you present at IANS, and I can attest you're a great presenter. It's going to be good. I'm really looking forward to it.
It's so nice, Brian. It's such an honor to be with you. I love your energy, your concepts, being here, what you do, and I'm very appreciative.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's funny because I asked you to do this, and you said, "Well, let's do it on October 1st." And you told me it's the anniversary of your brother's passing, and I was driving today getting ready for this. I'm like, this is perfect. Everything's divine timing. That's the other thing. If we start to look for it, we can see that things they seem to work out. And a lot of times it'll be delays, and we feel like this is not working out the way I wanted it to. And then you find out later on that that actually was the best time for this to happen. So I think it was Kierkegaard that said that life can only be understood looking backward, but it has to be lived forward. And the older that we get, the more we have to look back on, and more we can say, yeah, that's why that happened. That's why that happened when that happened. And that's why that didn't happen when I wanted it to, but this is actually even better. So when you don't get what you want, trust that you're going to get something better.
That is excellent. I love that philosophy. Yes, I totally agree. Something good will happen from everything is what I believe.
Yeah, I do too. Well, Becky, again, great being with you. I've loved doing this. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the 7th and after that in the future.
Sounds
great. To those who joined us live, thank you guys. Thanks for being here. For people watching the recording, look for the link in the notes to join up for the free webinar, and we'll see you there.
Thank you all so very much, and lots of love, always and forever. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Becky. See you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.